All right, we are in week number 3, right? We're in week 3 of our sermon series 7. And this has been a really interesting sermon series. We're talking about the 7 deadly sins, and really what this is it's a holiness series, okay? And it's kind of fun to see how holiness has emerged going all the way back, even with the early Catholicism, and of course Dante made the 7 deadly sins famous in his poetry, but to see how these sins have emerged, and really what it is it's people constantly asking the question, what is holy living? Growing up in the Wesleyan Church is very interesting because we are a holiness-obsessed group. I got to be careful saying this. I found as a child, I'd go to like youth camps and then go to family camps with my parents. And this was back in the day when they still had the old family camps at the Tabernacle. You remember that, where they didn't even have air conditioning, just the fans would run, and those old pews that had no padding, and my rear end would get tired, and my back would get tired. I'd start to lean over, and my mom would thump me in the ear and say, sit up straight. Loved family camp. But I knew as soon as that service was done, the snack shop was going to be open, and I was going to load up on those Nerds. Remember Nerds, the candy? Yeah, those were awesome as a kid. And we'd sit in there, and they'd pass out the little like self fans. Remember those self fans? And so you'd sit in the tabernacle. Yeah, I remember this. And we'd fan ourselves with the self fans because it'd be so hot in the middle of summer. And it was interesting to me because even as a young man and going through this, it was so funny how people have a tendency and they would go, that is an awesome holiness message, if the holiness message gave them another tool to scrutinize their life. Right? So we'd walk out and people would go, that was a powerful message. That was so transforming. And I'd walk out of there going, what you were given was another tool to scrutinize another aspect of your life and how you might be off, or something else that needs to be cut off or removed or gouged out the eye or whatever, something else in your life that needs to be removed so you can live just a little more holy. And as I got to be a little bit older, and especially when I started going to school and going to the university studying philosophy and religion with my undergraduates, I started going in there, I realized that, man, so much of our history is not, even in the holiness movement, it's not been a focusing on God, it's been a focusing on us. And the further I get along and the more I read this, and it really hit me this week, okay, don't miss these words. Holy living should be a byproduct of a right obsession. Holy living should be a byproduct of a right obsession. We are not obsessed with self. That's not what drives us. We are obsessed with God. And because we're so obsessed with God, holy living is a natural byproduct of that. Okay, so your greatest strength, especially today as we talked about lust and chastity, your greatest strength is your obsession with Jesus Christ. Your greatest strength is your obsession, your satisfaction in Jesus Christ. All right, we're going to do something a little nerdy again. We've been doing this every week as we try to get this really locked in. I want you to turn to your neighbor for just a moment, and I want you to tell them this, okay? So let me say this to you first, and then you can do it. Trust eternal truth over temporal desires. Trust eternal truth over temporal desires. Can you put that on the screen? Do we have that? Maybe we don't. I don't know. I didn't ask them to put this up there, so if they don't, that's okay. But trust eternal truth over temporal desires. Turn to your neighbor and say that real quick. Just lock it in. Go for it. Trust eternal truth over temporal desires. You got it. That's it. All right. You guys are great. Thanks for coming. Have a wonderful day. That's it. The meat of the message, trust eternal truth over temporal desires. Our holy living is a byproduct of a right obsession. Holy living is a byproduct of a right obsession. We don't want our obsession to be on self. We want our obsession to be on how majestic and fulfilling, how wonderful Jesus is. Our scripture memory verse for this series has been Hebrews 12, 1 through 2. I'm going to read this to you and then we'll read it together. I'm going to work the audience out today in a good way. I'll read it to you and then we'll read it together. Hebrews 12, 1 through 2 says this. Therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us also lay aside every weight, every sin which clings so closely, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God. All right, you ready? I'm going to have you guys read this now from the very top. Therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, us run with endurance the race that is set before us. Set before him, endured the cross, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand of God. Oh, may God add his blessing to the reading of his word. I love it. I love listening to people read the word of God. That's fun. Whether it's at home or at church, wherever it is. All right, what is lust? What is lust? You should be starting to see this trend as we work our way through this. All the deadly sins really hang on the concept of idolatry. Placing your satisfaction in something other than God. Lust, at its very fundamental, basic idea is, lust is wanting or deeply desiring what God hasn't given you. Lust is wanting or deeply desiring something that God hasn't given you. In the Bible, the concept of lust is tied in with sexuality often, but it goes beyond this. The concept is very broad. Lust is so much more than just sex. It is also closely related, the idea of lust is also closely related to envy. Let me give you a few different ways that we can lust. There is lust for power. Wanting influence that God hasn't given you. When I think about this, the first one that comes to mind is young people that have just finished their education, and then they go on and maybe get a master's, an MBA, and then they get the job, they get their first job, and they're out in the workplace, they're making money, they're engaged, and they're so frustrated because they don't have the power and influence that they feel like they deserve. They're struggling with lust. There's lust for power, wanting influence that God hasn't given you. There is lust of money, right? Wanting things, this is tied into material stuff, wanting things that God has not given you. There is lust of natural appetite, wanting to feed an appetite in a way God hasn't given you. This could be anything from food to sex. We're going to come back to that in a little bit. There is lust for gifting. All right, now let me explain this a little bit. Lust for gifting, wanting a spiritual or natural gift God hasn't given you. When I was in high school, there was a guy on my football team. And we actually got along fairly well. And he was one of these guys, he was very, very lazy in the weight room and at practice. But man, he was an incredible athlete. You ever met anybody like that? Yeah, it makes you sick. It's not fair. I mean, this guy in the weight room, he'd horse around, he'd joke around, he'd goof off. When it was time to, work out, squat, bench press, whatever, I mean, he kind of only half try. Then we get out to the field at practice, and he kind of half try during practice, man. But when it was game time, this guy could turn it on, and he was faster and stronger than the rest of us. And it had nothing to do with work ethic. It was all natural gifting. Hated that. In fact, honestly for me, because I did work hard, I loved the weight room, I enjoyed practice, I liked to learn and engage, and even physically, I liked that process, and so for me, I hated that this guy could be so lazy and be so good. It wasn't fair. It wasn't fair. I also remember, I've shared this with you all before, but I remember being in college, and I play the guitar, some of you know this, and I started taking piano lessons and was playing the piano. And in college, I actually wanted to be a worship leader. This was when I first felt called into ministry. That was one of the avenues that I wanted to go down. And I had one weakness. I can't sing very good. Now, I don't know if you know this or not, but to be a worship leader, you kind of have to sing. So every once in a while, if you sit close enough, see, I sit up here in the front, and there's nobody in the seats around me. There's probably a reason for that. The howl of the coyote in the front right from your section, that's me. I took voice lessons almost every year that I was in school. Went all the way through. That's right, I had to sing in Latin. It was really fun. Actually, it wasn't so fun. I did everything that I could. I wanted so bad. I wanted to be a good singer. And I'd sit in chapel, and because I've always been a fairly strong leader, so I helped put chapels together. And so I'd lead a chapel, and people would, bear through it. And then I'd get somebody else, and they'd lead a chapel, and people would love it. And then I started dating my wife, or we dated kind of through there on and off. But then we ended up getting married, and man, I brought my wife. And when I bring my wife in, I would build everything. I'd put the team together. I'd work with the team. And then I'd put Leslie out front, and everybody would be You're so amazing. Every tell her, you're so amazing. You're so gifted. God's given you such a gift. And I remember sitting there going, I wish I could sing. I wish I could sing. And it's not fair because I'm the one that's doing the work. I'm the one picking out the music. I'm the one putting the band together. I'm the one recruiting the drummer. I'm the one that goes through the halls and says, hey, you play drums? I need you. I need a drummer in chapel. Come on, let's do this. I'm the one doing all this work. And my beautiful, gorgeous wife steps out to the front of the stage, grabs the microphone, and holy, holy. And everybody stands up, and there's tears and weeping. Well, I don't know about tears and weeping, but everybody stands up, and they love it, and they're so caught up in the moment, and they get done, and they say, Leslie, you are such a phenomenal worship leader. And I'm thinking, all you did that day was sing. It's not fair. I want the gift, and I don't have it. I want something that God did not give me. There is lust for privilege, wanting a different life circumstance than God has given you. For example, when you were born, or if you were born poor, or born to an abusive, bad family, you deeply desire a different life circumstance, and you look back and you think, man, if I just would have been given different opportunities, everything could be different for me now, and God, it's your fault. Lust for power, lust for money, lust of natural appetite, lust for gifting, lust for privilege. But there's another piece to this puzzle. Lust is so dangerous because it puts us in this spot where God knows whether you have the capacity to handle wealth. And so God may choose, you do not. You are not allowed to be a wealthy person. It's like money or success is always just right out of your reach. And every time you reach for it, God's like, nope, not for you. And He knows that you lack the capacity to handle that type of weight. But lust is a funny thing because what happens is we get mad that God doesn't give us what we want. And then if we finally, in rebellion or chase after it and finally take it, even though God may not want it for you, and then it destroys our life, then we're mad at God because God allowed us to have our life destroyed. Do you see it? We're mad if He keeps it out of reach, and we're mad if we take it and it ruins us. The other day, I was taking my family to Grader's Ice Cream. Ever been to Grader's? Oh, yeah, I agree. That deserves applause. That place is amazing. I don't know if any Grader's workers watch these online or listen on the radio, but if you do, my name is Mike Cole. I'm the pastor at Trinity Church in Allisonville, and you can bring me ice cream anytime. Now, here's the thing with Grader's, okay? I am lactose intolerant, and so is one of my children. I have a child that's lactose tolerant too, the two of us. And we go there knowing that ice cream is forbidden fruit. And so I go down and I will eat a little bit, and it's really good. So I'm old enough now that I have enough temperance that I can kind of take a few bites and I can say no. But I have a child who is young enough and is lactose intolerant. They lack the ability to say no. So we'll get them some other stuff when they're there, or give them a lactose pill, maybe have a little bit. But ice cream for the most part is forbidden fruit. So we go down there here a few weeks ago. And my son had already had some milk earlier that day, and he really shouldn't have any. And we're down there, and the family's getting ice cream, and it's kind of unfair, and we can get him like a smoothie, or that smoothie with the fruit smoothie things or whatever, but it's not the same. And sure enough, I turn around at one point, and he is indulging in the leftovers from his brother and sister. And I don't mean just sampling it. I'm talking, let's get this down before Dad sees me. It didn't take very long, and my children are bouncing around, going crazy, and we get back in the van, and I even saw him eating some of it, and I thought, oh, fine. There are days as a parent you just are too tired to care. Have you ever been there? Yeah, you will if you haven't gotten there yet. There are going to be days where you're going, he's not going to die, we're okay. So we get in the car, we're driving home, and now this gluttonous mass of milk and sugar has really gotten into their bodies, and they're starting to get that sugar rush, and they start singing the song, I scream, you scream, we all scream for ice cream. They're screaming in the car, so my ears are ringing as a dad. It's really fun. And we get back to the house, and we get the kids ready for bed, loaded on sugar. It wasn't so smart, it's okay. And so we finally get everybody in bed, and it doesn't take long after we put them down, And I hear this, oh. And I hear the walking upstairs into the bathroom. And I go up there and I sit down. And he looks at me and he goes, Daddy, my tummy really hurts. And then he says, why did you let me have the ice cream? Okay, so let me get this straight. If I tell you no to ice cream, you're furious with me, and I'm a mean dad who keeps you from great things, but then when you eat the ice cream, me knowing that you can't handle it and it makes you sick, then you're mad at me too. No matter what I do, of course, this is the downside of having a dad as a pastor, right? No matter what I do, young man, no matter what I do, you're going to be mad at me. If I say no, you're mad at me. And if I let you have it and then you get sick, you're mad at me because I let you have it. Do you know what my kids really want? My kids really want to indulge in anything they want and have zero consequences. That's what they want. And that's exactly what you want. To indulge. Whatever your eyes desire, whatever you want, whatever is calling you out, you want to indulge in it and have no consequences. I mean, think about how much of our economy is wrapped around trying to remove consequences from sex, food, money, power. I mean, there's a whole economy that's been built around this idea of indulge in the lust of your flesh, and we're going to do everything that we can to try to remove consequences. We're not that far off from my kid. Lust. We have to learn to trust truth over desire. We have to learn to trust truth over desire. Turn to your neighbor and say, trust truth over desire. All right, that's hard, okay? And the hope is, as we mature, our desires move from temporal to eternal. I mean, eventually we want the desires of our heart to shift, okay? When lust seizes us, when temporal lust seizes us, we end up doing four things. Four things happen. One, we move into darkness. Instead of sharing our struggle, we hide it. And this is built into us. It doesn't have to be taught. Even with my child, when we go down to Grader's and there's ice cream there, and I look at him, and he turns around and he's looking at me, and when I look away, man, he goes down. He knows he's not supposed to have it. He knows it's not good for him. And in the dark, he consumes what he lusts after. Move into dark. Instead of sharing our struggle, we hide it. As lust continues to seize us, eventually we justify it by fixating on people who we consider to be worse off. I see this in counseling, especially when people come into my office and they're battled with an addiction of any kind. And one of the first things they'll throw out is, at least I'm not. Or, I have a friend that is way worse off. And as the lust continues to seize us, we move on to the next stage, right? We take out our anger on others we really feel towards ourselves. There's a phrase that's hurt people hurt people. Hurt people end up hurting people. And how this works, okay, so we take out our anger on others we really feel towards ourselves. I was talking with my mom a number of years ago just about counseling and working with people, and she was giving me some pointers on how to read into a situation. And she said it's kind of one of two extremes. You know, oftentimes the person that's convinced their spouse is cheating may actually be the one. That's not always true. She said it can be off, but oftentimes what we do is we project our deeper fears on other people. And as we continue to move into that, we become ever more bitter because the forbidden fruit never fully satisfies. We become even more bitter because the forbidden fruit never fully satisfies. And so where lust leads us is this place of lonely darkness. Angry because we're not satisfied by what we thought was going to satisfy us. And this could be anything from you not getting the promotion at work and wanting power and you've been looked over and it's not been given to you and God has kept it out of your reach, and the more you obsess over it, the more you try to manipulate to get that role, the more you gossip about somebody else, the more that you engage and try to attain your lust, the more you go after it, even if you finally get it, I'm telling you, the temporal's never going to fully satisfy. And now you bear all the weight of the process that you went through to get it. Psalms 51, 7 through 12, I love this. This is the heartbeat of today's message. Psalm 51, 7 through 12 says this, "Purge me with hyssop and I shall be clean. Wash me and I shall be whiter than snow. Let me hear joy and gladness." All right, now you got to remember, when you are in darkness, when you hurt, when bitterness has consumed you, even when you've gotten the thing that you shouldn't have, when you've eaten the forbidden fruit and it doesn't feel good, you're not satisfied. Let me hear joy and gladness. Let the bones that you have broken rejoice. Hide your face from my sins. This is David crying out to God. "And blot out all my iniquities. Create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a right spirit within me. Cast me not away from your presence, and take not your Holy Spirit from me. Restore to me the joy of your salvation, and uphold me with a willing spirit." Now, to really understand this, I've heard this in songs over and over again, from hymns to modern music, and oftentimes the writers don't get the context correct. This is the big picture. King David, God's chosen one, has sinned with Bathsheba. He looked, and maybe initially it wasn't his fault, but beauty came and presented itself to him. And instead of bouncing the eyes or going, "Not for me," you allow yourself, whatever it may be, from sex to power, to money, influence, whatever it is, you allow that to begin to speak into your heart and mind, and you lay in bed and you think of the money that you could make, or you lay in bed and you think of the pleasure that you could have, you lay in bed and you think of the toy that you may want, and slowly but surely, as that beauty pops into your gaze, it begins to consume you and shape you. King David sinned with Bathsheba. His world has crashed in around him. Lust that started as an accidental glance one evening became an intentional second look. It moved into desire and finally birthed an affair that led even further to murder and ultimately collapsed part of his family. The writings of Dr. John Piper and Dr. Timothy Keller brought something to my attention that I have since used many times. I first read this a while back. We find a glimpse of this in the Psalms, this idea of what healing is supposed to be like. How do we break free from the lust? How do you let go? I mean, in your mind and heart, that's the problem, because lust is so powerful and it consumes you. And the more you let it consume you, the stronger it gets, and it sinks in deeper and its roots go down further into your heart. And pretty soon you can't help but obsess over the job that you didn't get or the person that got the role that you wanted. You can't help but obsess over the money that you want to make. You can't help but obsess over the girl that you want to have or the guy that you want to be with. You can't help but obsess over it. And those roots are going deeper and deeper, and we begin to see how you shatter that. How do you break this? We find a glimpse of this in the Psalms. Well, King David, this is Dr. John Piper and Timothy Keller combining their ideas here. While King David is confessing his sexual sin with Bathsheba, listen closely to the words of the Psalms again, right? Let me hear joy and gladness. Let the bones that you have broken rejoice. Restore to me the joy of your salvation and uphold me with a willing spirit. Now, you got to really understand the text here. Notice what is and isn't happening. In this specific context, he isn't asking for accountability. Now, he needs it, and we all need accountability, but that's not what he's asking first for. He isn't asking for accountability or for God to remove all his temptations. That's not what he's asking for. Or even for sexual restraint. He's not going, Lord, please help me to stop wanting things sexually. That's not what he's praying for. He's not praying, Lord, help me to stop, ever wanting to work hard at work. I mean, he's not praying for that. He's not saying, God, help me to stop wanting to increase and get further along at the office. That's not what he's praying for. He is asking for deep satisfaction in something else. Something eternal and consistent, something to live for that satisfies more than anything sexual. He's looking for something that satisfies more than money or power or a big home or a nice car. He's looking for something that satisfies more. One of the greatest lies, now you got to really listen in, from teenagers to the oldest in this room, one of the greatest lies that the enemy tells you, we all have, Blaise Pascal calls it the God-shaped vacuum. We all have this innate openness, this desire. We long to be fulfilled and to be full. And one of the greatest lies of the enemy is he whispers in your ear that sex is going to fill that void. Or he whispers in your ear, money is going to fill that void. Or he whispers in your ear, if you just had a little more popularity or influence, if you were just married, you'd be whole. And God doesn't love you because he's not letting you become whole. And David, man, when he calls out to God in the middle of the darkness, when he calls out to God, restore my joy. Heal my heart. God, draw me to you. Create in me a clean heart. Oh God, restore the joy. And what joy? What is the joy that he wants and he has, that he had? Restore the joy of my salvation. And see what David is doing, this is so powerful. What David is doing is he's not saying that all of this, that money is always evil. It's not saying that sex is always evil. He's not saying that. What he does, he said, Lord, let the deepest part of my joy shift from the lies of the temporal and let me become obsessed with the eternal. You see, holiness, at the very fundamental level, holiness is a byproduct of a right obsession. If you want to live a holy life, you've got to have the right obsessions. You can't live a holy life if you're obsessed with money. You can't live a holy life if you're obsessed with sex. You can't live a holy life if these temporal things have your heart. You can't do it. Holiness is a byproduct of the right obsession. You don't fight lust by turning off desires, but by aiming them in an appropriate, godly way. There's a prayer that I've started praying with people that struggle with addictions. And I think when I was young and I was first getting into ministry, I would often pray that God would lesser desires. So I'd pray with somebody that may be struggling with, gambling, and they're wanting to make money, and I'd pray, God, help that desire for money to just become less, shove that down. Or people that are battling with sexual addictions, God, I pray by your grace that you'd take that and you'd lessen it, you'd help it to go down, lower their desire. And as I read through the text, I tell you what, that power, that longing, I don't want to shut it off. I want to show them something that's going to fill them in a deeper way than money or power or sex ever could. We're just about done. I'm going to invite Jason to come to the front. A little self-analysis. Where am I? Do I struggle with lust? Let me give a few situations and see kind of where you fall on this. Jeff Foxworthy's, you might be a redneck if. This is the church's version. You might be a lustful person if. I'm not sure how that works, right? But that's my attempt. You might be a lustful person if you resent the success of another person. You might be a lustful person. You might be a lustful person if you think, God, I want my share of whatever it might be. You might be a lustful person if you know exactly what's missing from your life. Like in your mind, you can go, if I just had whatever that is in your mind, if I just had this, I would be complete. You may be wanting something that God doesn't want for you. And the greatest gift that he could give you, is to say no. Because if you were to steal it away or take it, he knows what would happen in your heart and in your life. You might be a lustful person if you look across the room at the young, beautiful, confident lady and wish that you were that type of person. You might be a lustful person if you are fully convinced you are just as gifted as the person who was picked for the position or sports team or part in a play that you wanted, and God said no. I had a friend of mine in high school who was a phenomenal athlete, but 2 steps away from being like Division I choice. Wasn't quite fast enough, wasn't quite strong enough, this close. He worked so hard. First one to the gym, last one to leave, throwing down protein shakes and raw eggs and anything and everything. At that time, of course, now we know that's a bad idea, but doing anything and everything that he could to become a little faster and a little stronger. And from his own admission, he was a Christian kid, from his own admission, it felt like God just kept what he wanted right out of reach, so close. Coaches are even saying, man, if you could just get that 40 time down, just a little tiny bit, you'll be looked at, just a little faster. And I remember going to his house. We were good friends. And he said, Mike, I started taking steroids. And then he started sharing with me. He's like, I think this is what I'm supposed to do. Like starts justifying it in his mind. It's what I'm supposed to do. I mean, we need really good Christian kids on like Division I sports teams. We need good Christians in there. And this is going to give me a chance to go be a great witness for Jesus. I remember listening to this, even in high school. Even dumb high school Mike was going, wait a minute, red flag, bad idea. Something's off here. This doesn't feel quite right. And man, he took what God wouldn't give him. He took it. He wasn't naturally fast enough. He wasn't naturally good enough, and he took it. And he couldn't handle it. About 10 years later after that, he got a hold of me again. Been a long time. And I could hear him crying on the phone. Mike, I just got to restart my life. What do I do? Put your obsession in Jesus. Just do that. Just do that. Put your obsession in Jesus. Instead of spending so much time even now looking in the mirror at all that is broken, all that is off, all the things that are wrong with you, and go, how can I scrutinize this even more? What do I need to cut off? What needs to happen? Instead of obsessing over yourself, I'm going to ask you to get on your knees and pray, Lord, help my obsession. Help me to be fixed on you. You see, holiness is a byproduct of a right obsession. Holiness is a byproduct of a right obsession. Holiness, if you want to live a holy life, it is going to be a byproduct of a right obsession. If you're a parent, your children need to see you obsessed with Jesus. Your marriage or your home, your spouse needs to see you obsessed with Jesus. The more I study, the more I learn, the more I become a fanatic. Because only Jesus, Blaise Pascal is right, only Jesus fills that void. I'm going to read our memory verse for this series one more time. I'm going to invite our ushers to come up and we're going to receive communion. Hebrews 12, 1 through 2. Okay, so if you could do me a favor right now, remember, holiness is a byproduct of a right obsession, okay? I want you to do something for just a moment, okay? I want you to shut off all the noise for just a moment. Close your eyes for just a second. Close your eyes for just a second, and I want you to listen closely to the words. These ancient words, listen to them. Hebrews 12, 1 through 2. Therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us also lay aside every weight, sin which clings so closely, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us. Looking to Jesus, raising our heads right, looking to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God. All right, look up here again. It may be a gift when Jesus says no. Because he wants your heart more than he wants you to be rich. He wants your heart more than temporal pleasures. He wants your heart.